Counting down in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Lesley Cairnduff, aka my mother, welcome to CamTalks.
Well, thank you very much, Cameron. This is a first, isn't it?
It is. It's absolutely wonderful to have you on this show. Obviously, I've had Dad on before, so I figured why not get you on? And obviously, as you know, I've recently
Make it a family affair.
Absolutely. I mean, look, we're a very close family as it is, but also as the fact that I've just recently turned 28. And you know, I don't know, I feel like a very transformative time in my life right now. So, you know, I want to talk a little bit more about you, and so maybe we can just figure out over this podcast, you know, what the future is going to look like based on my past. So let me go back, Mum. I've recently turned 28. What were you doing at the age of 28?
What was I doing at 28 that I can tell you about? Well, I hadn't met your father. I was nursing for the NHS. At that point, I was a ward sister, a ward manager, in an elderly unit in West London. And I was just enjoying life, basically. I just bought my first flat.
Crikey, look at that. The baby boomers buying their first flat at 28. What can I say? But tell me then,
my first car, my first flat.
And what was it like? I mean, look, you're going to have to forgive me here. What year was it when you were 28?
Oh my gosh. Well, you do the maths. I was born in 1956. So, what, 70? 85?
85?
Oh, no, that's not. No, my maths isn't very good, is it?
Well, if anyone is listening out there and understands math, you will be well aware.
Maths is not my strong point, is it?
So, Mum, what was it? You know, what was it like? So, you were in London when you were my age, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm in London now. What was London like? You know, when you were 28?
When I was 28, oh my gosh! Looking back at it now, it was. Well, all I can say, when I come and see you guys in London, the thing that strikes me immediately is how much cleaner it is, which might sound daft with all the pollution and everything, but traveling on the tube, I think, is such a nice experience. I mean, when I think back to how people were allowed to smoke on the tubes years ago,
No way.
And I think as well, I feel probably a bit safer, if anything. There's a lot more people around, and that's for sure. I mean, London was always very busy, always has been very, very busy.
So Mum, I mean, it's crazy. Obviously, you didn't have a smartphone back then, and
no,
to get around London. Well, this is it. We use an app called City Mapper to get wherever we want. But when you needed to get across London, did you actually, you know these stations? Did you know that?
Well, no, only by getting lost and learning. So you'd have an A to Z in your hand, which obviously
that's a map, right?
Yes, which is a street map, which instantly made you quite vulnerable for anybody looking to mug someone. So yes, you were just sort of trial and error. It was trial and error, really.
Yeah. Well, it's different times, right?
Yeah. Totally different times. And driving around London, I don't think I'd even dare do it now, but driving around London was, again, it was trial and error. And I always remember my mate Janine saying, you can't go wrong driving in London, Lesley, as long as you clock the guy on the roundabout to your right, but you don't let him see that you've clocked him. If that makes sense. So you just go.
Just confidence.
You don't actually go, but yes, there's a bit of confidence. And she also said, stick within the lines. And touch wood, I haven't had an accident yet. But I don't know whether I'd like to do it these days. I don't know. I probably would be able to, but I do remember going down Earlscourt Road the wrong way once.
Wow.
I probably wouldn't get away with that these days.
I don't think so. Well, look.
I did have to do a 3-point turn, really, quickly.
Well, it's a good job that you now live on a tiny island in the middle of the channel, right?
Isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. I can't hit much over here, can I?
So, Mum, look, you were born in Wales. You moved down to London to have a wonderful career with NHS. and then obviously you met Dad. And to tell me what was that like meeting Dad for the first time? I mean, he is
Oh my
10 years
goodness.
older than you, which, you know, at my age, there's some relationships with friends of mine who are slightly older. What was that like for you, dating a man who was slightly older? And how old were you when you met Dad?
I was 30. Dad was 40. I was 30. Um, we met at a friend's wedding. Yeah, I mean, it was just, he had his mind set on a very tall, leggy blonde. I'm sure you've heard this story. And I crossed his path with a plate of food, and that was it, really. Obviously, I wasn't a tall, leggy blonde. Yeah, and it was lovely. We just clicked instantly. But one of the first things he said to me was, "Love me, love Alderney." So I didn't know Alderney at all. So we met in the July, and he brought me over here for the first time in the New Year. I was working Christmas and Boxing Night, and I was working all over the Christmas period, so I could actually have New Year off. And came to Alderney and fell in love with it, which is just as well.
So
Otherwise,
you passed
would
the
have
test.
said cheerio.
Yeah, that's it.
Otherwise, he would have said bye-bye, have a nice life, Lesley. That was it. So.
Wow. And then obviously, you know, moving forwards, you know, Dad was making videos at the time, you know, very different to how I make videos these days.
Oh, well, he had, yes, totally. He had Apple Television. I didn't have a clue what he did.
So you didn't
Not a
know,
clue.
you didn't know anything, you know, the big boxes full of stuff, never asked what was in them.
Well, I never really saw them. I mean, to be honest, your dad, God bless him, he wasn't sort of commitment phobic or anything, but let's just say he didn't give me a front door key to his house for about 2 years.
Wise man.
That was fine. That was fine because I had my own front door key. So, and also because I was working shifts, and and Dad would be doing his thing, I'd be doing my thing, and we got into a routine of Monday was always a very busy day in my work, you know, things that might have happened over the weekend and stuff. So we wouldn't see each other on a Monday night. I had a very nice flat in Ealing, and we were just sort of like, I'd go up to him on the Tuesday in Hendon, and then Saturday we'd always stay in for blind date, Cilla Black. We got into a nice little routine, and it was lovely. It was just comfortable and lovely, really.
Oh, I think it's such a nice imagination, or you know, to picture you and Dad, you know, running around London together, courting, as I'm sure you would have called it then. So look, what was the main attraction to Dad? You know, I mean, obviously, you know, he's a wonderful man. His voice. That's really interesting. Yes. That, you know, because Nina, you know, my partner suggests that my voice is something that she really is attracted to. So maybe I get that. Well,
there you go. Perhaps it's in the genes.
Yeah, I feel it's the bass. I think there's enough bass in it to move someone.
Yes, and I heard his voice quite a bit because he did pursue me on the telephone quite a bit in work. And I don't know whether you've heard this story, but he'd clean forgotten my name after we'd spent all night together at the wedding.
No.
But he did. So, and I said, he phoned me in work, and I said, "You've forgotten my name, haven't you?" And he went, "No, I haven't." Of course I haven't. It's Doris, isn't it? Anyway, I kept him hanging for about 6 weeks. And he was calling me Doris. So he would write poems to me and send little things to me addressed to Doris.
That's so sweet. That's
I put him out of his misery
melt.
after. And I've still got all the poems. I'll show you one day.
Oh, bless. Well, look, that's, I mean, it's such a lovely thing to imagine. But then kind of moving on slightly, you know, Emily came, and then what, 21 months later, was it? I came? 20?
Yeah,
28?
yes,
yeah. How was that?
What was causing it?
Well, listen, I know from my experience in filmmaking and video production that it's very often, you know, you can never really tell how long things are going to take. So I imagine at that time, Dad was very just busy, and you're obviously busy pulling long hours with the NHS and juggling 2 children. How was that?
It was difficult, but then, you know, anything that's worth having you know, it's not easy, is it? You know, I mean, I just loved it. Dad was just amazing. Dad worked all the hours he could. With you, it was different because I had longer maternity leave. So
Was that a
by that
requested?
time, well, no, it wasn't really. I was able to take it. And with two children, well, two babies, really, um, it was good to have that time, really. Yeah, it was lovely. I look back on those days, and it was just lovely, absolutely lovely. In fact, I've got to be honest, I don't think I've come back down to earth after having either one of you. I
Oh,
seriously mean that. I feel so sorry for people who have the most wonderful thing happen to them and then have postnatal depression. I really feel for those people because I was just on a high. I haven't come down really. So
well, it sounds like it sounds like it was, you know, you didn't have enough time to be really that stressed.
no, we were very busy.
Well, listen,
And of
so
course, then I was traveling back for the North Circular, lots and lots and lots, and work by that time they were very good. And if we had the odd blip with childminding, I didn't have it when I had the two of you, but with Emily, I could take her into work sometimes with me.
wow.
And in fact, I've got to tell you I hadn't been back in work long after I'd had Emily, and with her I had to go back after 3 months, and that was quite hard. And one day we had a ward managers meeting, and our boss said, we're thinking of taking some residents on a holiday to the Isle of Wight. And I said, well, you can count me out, obviously, because I can't do it because I've just had a baby. And he said, oh, well, you can take Emily with you. So I had no excuse. So for about 10 months, I planned this holiday of taking 25 people, all elderly, most of them, well, they all had dementia. But it was great. We sort of worked out a way of doing the whole thing. I had to go on a little course and learn to drive a minibus. And it was great. So see,
Amazing.
these things, when they sort of, you know, present themselves to you, you just do it. You've got to rise to it, haven't you, really? I had a great time. I have to say, nobody actually remembered going when we came back, but it was a lovely time. And we knew that they'd enjoy themselves by the pictures. They were all smiling,
Oh.
so there you go.
Well, look, so first of all, Mum, if we can try and just keep looking at the camera.
Okay.
Well, can you just look at the screen? Let's.
Okay.
So the NHS in that time, I'm sure, is very different to what it is today. So what exactly was the main focus of your job back then?
Well, I mean, I started off as a ward sister, with obviously sort of like running a ward. And during my time as a ward sister, Maggie Thatcher's government brought in, I'm sure it's Maggie Thatcher, should know, they brought in a new thing where they were completely reforming the NHS. And it meant that nationally, lots of people, particularly in management positions, were having to apply again for their own jobs, which was terrible, really. But I was lucky because I was the only ward sister on that ward. So I was fine, but I was sent off with a whole load of people. They sent us off for 2 nights to a hotel in Ruislip, and we came back as ward managers,
Wow.
having to deal with budgets for all sorts of things. And most of us who were there, what the hell are we doing here? You know, we went into nursing because we wanted to do nursing. You know, and okay, as a ward sister, you happily took control, and you know, you led the ward as you know, to the best of your ability. But then, after this 2-day course, we were all expected to be managers, and that was one of the scariest things because we didn't want to be really. And well, you know me now. I mean, I've got no idea about money. I don't spend it, you know, wildly, but I haven't got much idea about money.
Well, you say that, but you know, you and Dad have obviously you know, made a really comfortable life for yourselves, and I guess that probably wouldn't have happened if you had stayed within the NHS and stayed within that that kind of framework. So moving on, you know, when me and Emily, I think I was about 3 years old, Emily was about 4, you and Dad decided to buy a care home, a residential care home, when you got 2 little kids. You know, you've got these incredible, this job that's just, I mean, both for you and Dad were just doing amazingly hard work. What was it that made you decide that buying a care home was going to be the future of the Cairnduff family?
Well, I mean, it was a few things, really. I mean, in those days, if you ran that sort of place correctly and properly, there was, you know, it was a good, financially, it was good. Also, we were in Hendon in North London. I was running ragged with 2 kids. I wasn't seeing you then. When I went back to work, I wasn't seeing you. We were playing this ridiculous thing with Dad, you know, so being really busy. And it was more stressful, really, because we weren't all together. So we thought, well, if we bought a care home, either a care home or a nursing home, we looked at both. But as long as it had somewhere to live in the grounds, or if we could all be together. So we took, after we all got over when your nan had a complete duck fit, she thought we'd completely lost our marbles and thought we were awful even thinking about it. We took a whole year to look at various care homes that were on the market. And when a care home is on the market, it's generally not known, because quite rightly it would sort of destabilize the whole staffing system and everything. So we had to resurrect my great auntie Doris, who'd been dead for about 10 years, and we had to pretend that we were looking for a place to put Auntie Doris in. And anyway, and we went all over the place. We went to Wales, Sussex,
I remember,
you name it, yeah. And sometimes you and Emily you'd be shoved in the back of the car with ham sandwiches and a couple of packets of quavers, and you'd have to go and look at these places, and we had to sort of make sure that you didn't question Auntie Doris's existence. Anyway, so eventually, after long searches, we found a place in Hampshire that was just amazing. So we looked at the schools, and you know, I hope you'll agree. I mean, they were lovely schools there, you know, state
Absolutely.
schools.
Yeah.
It just fitted the bill. There was a lovely bungalow, as you remember, at the back.
Mm-hmm.
So we were within the grounds. It just ticked all the boxes. So that's why we plumped for where we did.
It's incredible.
So happy.
I have such fond memories of that move from London down to Southampton, you know, to now live with 27 old people. How many were there?
Well, we started off, it was registered for 20 to begin with, and then we did an extension which just took us up to 22. So it was big enough to be a professional setup, but it was small enough to be very, very personal, which is what I wanted.
But then obviously with the family there, you know, I mean, this is a family run business, essentially. I remember, you know, forever seeing Dad in his office, doing the paperwork and making sure that the money is ticking. And I remember seeing you just being the heart and soul of this home, which, you know, let's face it, the staff were just, you know, they were so high on the, you know, the enthusiasm that you used to bring in, you know, whether it's like, you know, you wanted to just do extra fun days, or you wanted to do these crazy ideas. And I think maybe that's probably your experience back in the NHS, having to drive a minivan, you know, probably getting all these ideas like, let's go to the cinema, let's go to the theatre. I remember taking trips with you and a few of the residents where we'd have to, you know, we'd go see Dick Whittington or some pantomime somewhere. And you just think it's like 12 old ladies on a bus, and there's me as like a young child having to do something responsible, which is just keep an eye on her because she's a wanderer, you know. And me and Emily just kind of grew up in this environment of just, I mean, it was extreme compassion. That's all I could call it, because I always knew that Dad was taking care of the business end. But how was that? Because obviously, you know, you and Dad are a wonderful couple, but you do have different skill sets, right?
Oh, totally. Yes, totally. Well, of course, Dad had run his own businesses anyway. I mean, he's always, that's what he's always done, and that's what he's very, very good at, obviously. I'm not. But but obviously with my care background, my nursing background, we were a great skill mix. You know, obviously, like with anything, if you had two of us who were out to make money, that wouldn't work. And if there were two of us carers, then we wouldn't make the money and we would have folded. So, I mean, it's a very sort of fine line, really, sort of to make a profit and to keep it, keep it running to the standard that you want. I mean, I have to say, in all those years, I think we might have had, say, one or two disagreements. And don't tell Dad, but he was right every time, really. But I mean, if I went to him and I said, look, Ronnie, we need to do whatever, invest in something. As long as I and the staff were able to justify why it was needed, he'd go, yeah, okay, fine. Once, say one or two occasions, he went, no, or we'll have to wait for that. And most of it, he was right.
Wow. So he made you pitch for it, fight for it, you know, fight for any business decisions.
Well, he didn't make me. Sorry, he didn't make me fight for anything. I mean, it was wonderful, but he just had a way of making me realise that perhaps he was right with something, you know, and vice versa. If I said something on the care lines, you know, and I sort of said exactly why, coming from a carer, if I explain why something was necessary, you know, he said, okay, fine, if that's what's needed, then that's fine. Amazing. So it was just a lovely working partnership, and it just worked well. And as you remember, you know, I mean, there were such lovely times in there, really. And I do remember you and Emily used to say to some people, if you wanted to wind them up, you'd tell people that you and your sister were growing up in a care home. And then you'd wait for the sympathy vote. And you go, oh, that's a shame. You go, no, it's great, fantastic. And you used to say, we've got 22 grandparents at any one time.
Yeah, no, I absolutely remember it, because I have such fond memories of, you know, of the residents and the staff, and being able to kind of grow up listening, I think was probably the best skill that I've kind of, you know, carried on. And of course, now I'm in a similar position where, you know, I've got my own business now, and actually, you know, being compassionate in these days is much more important, because the world's so transparent. So, you know, if you want to be a cutthroat businessman, well, people are going to know about that. So compassion in business is now much more important now than ever before. So, Mum, what's the sort of best piece of advice about, you know, I mean, because I imagine there's a lot of people out there currently running businesses who don't feel like they're the most compassionate. What would be your kind of you know, advice to bring in those values into your world?
Well, it sounds a very sort of obvious thing to say, but you treat everybody like you would want to be treated, and look after your staff, because they are your number one asset. Always look after your staff.
And of course, your staff worked so hard and created such a communal feeling that, I mean, Brookdale Care Home was awarded Care Home of the Year 10 years in a row, was it?
In Hampshire, yeah. Well, it's quite a few, but we had different accolades throughout those 20 years. We had best newcomer with carer. Our kitchen won lots of awards. But that's because, I suppose, you know, we generated it as well. You know, so I mean, that's what it's all about. It's all about, I remember when we first went there, and training, and like, it's awful when you think about it now, but training was not mandatory. There was a few things like fire and what have you, but other than that, there was no training required. Anybody could become a carer, which, when you think about that, is frightening. And because I'd always been in training hospitals, I couldn't get my head around this fact that you could just, you know, not have any training. And also in those days, lots of people would actually refer to themselves as, oh, I'm just a carer. And that used to baffle me, really. And I remember for the first 12 months, as well as trying to get the business up and running, I was trying to get interest from the staff to do their national vocational qualifications, you know, the NVQs, which were very different to what they are now. And it was like, it was painful at first because they weren't interested. Some of the older ones were good carers, but, oh, you can't teach me anything. You know, I've been in this, there's nothing and so it took me about 10 months maybe to get the first person to go, okay, I'll have a go at that. And then it was realized how much more, how much fun it was learning about why you're doing things, looking at different ways of doing things. And it was like everybody then so got on the bandwagon and they went, oh, I'd like to do that. Then they realized that the worth of what they were doing. And they would sort of have little sort of get-togethers at different houses over a bottle of wine or two and do their different, coursework and stuff. And then when they were being assessed, they took such pride in it. And so that's how things changed. It was training.
Mm-hmm. And I think
training all the time.
I remember that so well, whether it was, doing first aid training or fire training. I remember, it was almost like an activity day and I'd be in the garden playing like, climbing a tree or something. I'd see a firefighter and I'm like, oh, what's going on there? And then I'd go and see, and there's a bin on fire. And I'm like, oh, and all the staff are taking it in turns to put out the fire.
Well, yeah, so that's mandatory anyway. But I mean, you make it fun. Yeah. It always had to be fun. Anything had to be fun. I mean, at the end of the day, these are people's homes. And so you've got to make it fun. You've got to respect absolutely that it's their home, it's not yours. And you have to try as best as you possibly can to work around them. If Mrs. Smith wants to have a lie-in until 11 o'clock, and go to bed at 11 o'clock in the night time and stay up eating cheese on toast with the staff, so be it. As long as it's their welfare, it's what they want to do, I don't have to tell you what it's like. It was never quiet in there, really, was it? There were quiet places where people could go for a bit of peace and quiet. And when visitors came, there were quiet rooms, but most of the time, the visitors like to stay where the action was, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I remember it very fondly. And look, we could probably do a whole podcast series about growing up in a care home.
Care home, yeah.
But, I want to kind of move us forward a little bit because, everything that you're talking about, understanding them. I feel like this kind of, a lot of your values came from Grandad. And stop me if you don't think this is right, but Grandad died when I was very little, but one of the things he always used to say to me was to see the world through another man's eyes is the greatest skill you could ever learn. And that was something that I've always thought about. And whether I'm in business or whether I'm, just trying to solve a problem, just to think from someone else's point of view, I think is just a wonderful skill. But look, there is a very strong chance that we wouldn't have even existed. Because as you know, Grandad was in the war. Grandad was in the Navy. He was a gunner on one of the battleships. And that ship took an explosion from a U-boat, and Grandad went flying 60 foot into the air. And so, there's only one name that comes to mind. The reason why we're all here, and that's Geroge Furey.
Wonderful Geroge Furey
rescued your dad, my granddad. Tell us about that story. Tell us about Geroge Furey, who he was.
Well, Geroge Furey was a hero, and he was a Newfoundland man. He was your granddad was he was 20 by then. In fact, just for his 21st birthday, he was in the Navy in the war. He was on convoy in on a destroyer called the Fire Drake. And as you say, it took a hit. 1942, 12th of December. Most of the crew died either through being hit by the torpedo or in the water. And Geroge Furey was on a boat that came to try and sort of save as many people as possible. And it was 60-foot waves, obviously freezing cold water. And Geroge Furey volunteered to put a rope around his waist and jump into that freezing cold water and save as many souls that he could that were still alive in the water. And thank goodness Dad was one of those people. And when George found Dad, all his clothes had been blown to shreds. The only thing he had on was his identification and a cross and chain that Nan had given him. And it was only stuck to his chest because of the oil, because there's lots of oil in the water. And his left arm was blown to bits, really. And so his right arm was hooked around the Carley flow like a big netting that was on the water. Anyway, George saved Dad and got him back on his boat. Dad was obviously, he couldn't remember much about it. He knew he'd been saved, obviously. And he spent about 6 months in the hospital in Newfoundland. They were about to amputate his arm when some young medic, who actually went on to be some very eminent surgical professor, they'd had a ward round, and Dad's arm was in traction, and they were going to, not doing anything, he's going to have to cut it off. And they'd all turned to go and see the next person in the next bed in this ward round. And this young medic, he came back to Dad and he went, "Did I just see you wiggle your finger?" And he went, "Yeah, like that, And he said, "I'm going to save that arm for you." And he did. I mean, Dad was full of wires and steel and stuff. But, and as children, we didn't even appreciate that, because Mum would say, "Hey, David, how about knocking that wall down?" He'd go, "Okay, Babs." And it was down before we had a chance to change our mind.
I remember his bionic arm. It was
his bionic arm.
Yeah, he could always make it click, and
yes.
But the really interesting thing is the fact that, without that intervention by Geroge Furey, without the willingness, even despite orders that we can't get a boat in the water, the waves are too high, instead of thinking, "All right, we're just going to wait till it calms down," it's like, no, like, there's people in the water and I need to save them. And obviously moving forward to the modern day, there is an association set up around the survivors of the fire drake, and as we know, we found so many more stories and other survivors. And just remind me, what was it that Geroge Furey said all those years later, when asked about that day? Was it something
I think he was racked with guilt in a way that he couldn't save more people, but the people he did save, I would love Dad to have spoken more about it when he was alive. He didn't. And I don't know why Dad didn't speak more about it. And of course, we didn't have the internet in those days as well. But I think Dad just wanted to forget it. So he didn't really know as much as you and I know now, because thanks to you, after Dad's death, we felt able to, without sort of disrespecting him, look into things. And I'm so pleased you did, because now, sadly, he died, Geroge Furey died back in the 80s. But I do keep in touch with the family now, and obviously with COVID, it might not happen, but the daughter is hoping to be in France in September, all the way from Newfoundland. So if it's possible, I'd love to go and meet her in person, and just, I can't thank them enough, or her father, because he really is the reason we're all here. Wonderful, Geroge Furey.
Well, look, if the meeting doesn't take place because of coronavirus, at least you now know that this technology exists, right? That we can have these conversations via video. Mum, what's it like, using all of this technology? I mean, it's been a real wake up, this coronavirus thing, right?
Yeah, but I hate anything to do with technology. You really, I am hating this really, but I know you know what you're doing. It is wonderful. It is absolutely wonderful. And the very fact that we've had this in such a unprecedented time in all our lives is just amazing. Nothing can actually sort of take the place of a good hug, a good cwtch, a good Welsh cwtch. But hopefully that'll happen soon enough. But, it needs must, and we're very grateful for all this technology. Really.
Absolutely. And of course, right now you're sat in the dining room in Alderney, the smallest of the Channel Islands. What an absolute beautiful place. But how is it right now, with the threat of the coronavirus? I'm aware that Alderney's not had it reached its shores yet. So yeah, what's the feeling like on the island?
Well, I almost don't like to say this really, because it's almost like survivor's guilt. But most of us have had a very good time, really. I mean, I'm not sort of, to make connect that it's easy, but the fact that it's such a small island that we've been able to shut it down to really stop it coming on the island. Of course, that's in a way that's great. It's fantastic. But if it were to get a hold in Alderney, come on Alderney for some reason, we'd be very much. Oh, I don't know how we would manage, because it's not that we wouldn't have enough ventilators. We don't have one. I mean, it's like it's an island of what, 3.5 miles by 1.5 miles. So we've got a lovely little hospital and they're fantastic, and the medical staff have been amazing, but we couldn't cope. So any cases that would come to Alderney would have to be sent over to Guernsey. Well, of course, Guernsey don't want that either. So we're just being very compliant with everything. We are ahead of the mainland because, in fact, today, the 11th of June, we're about to have another news report from the States of Guernsey that probably will tell us we can go into the next phase. And even now, we are able, the pubs are open now. All the shops are open.
It's slowly getting to some point.
Yes, it's with restrictions, obviously. You can't go up to a bar and get a drink, but it's a 1 meter distance from people. It's table service. You have to leave your name and number.
God, I bet you must be so relieved that you're not running the care home anymore.
I am. Yes. I mean, every time I think about that, my blood runs cold. I guess if we were young, and we'd be up for it, like all the care homes have had to be, and I do admire them so much. And I know sometimes care homes get a real knocking, but there are far more wonderful care homes there than there are bad ones. Really, they really are, with the most amazing staff. And as you know, I keep in touch with the core staff from our old care home, and and they've been sort of working so hard, and being tested as much as is able.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for them. But yes, I mean, so I'm sitting here on this wonderful island thinking, well, yeah.
Well, but this is it, is that obviously not all of the problems that we have in the world can be seen. And obviously now this is a very hard time, particularly around people's mental health, particularly in isolation. I think it's a global crisis, not just of a physical one, but a mental one.
Yes.
You're very involved in the Millie's Foundation. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Millie's Foundation and what the goal of it is?
Well, Millie's Foundation, basically, it's an island-centered charity to look after either somebody with dementia or their family when they're still in the community. So we have a very good care home here, but leading up until that point when people have to go to a care home, maybe, it's really looking after the home situation. So whether it's a carer, maybe a husband or a daughter or son who's looking after somebody with dementia, whether it's taking the person who's suffering with dementia out of that home for a while, for a drive, go on the beach, whatever, or sitting so that the person can actually leave the house for a while. So just like everybody is an individual, it's individual needs that arise. It's all about individual needs. So yeah, I mean, we do whatever people want. I mean, so like a while ago, there was a person who just needed to get out for a couple of hours to go to snooker club, knock a few balls around. So I go and sort of sit with the partner so that would happen, and the same with Mind, which has now got off the ground, which is Guernsey. It comes under the Guernsey mental health, but we've got our own branch here now, and in fact that's starting again next week. So I'm back to that, which is it's just giving someone a place to, just sit and chat or have somebody listen to them for a while. And of course, as you say, with this coronavirus, there's been so many people unlike us who have really suffered in this lockdown. You know, if they've been on their own, isolated on their own, it must be so difficult for some people.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, and so there's lots of people with underlying depressive conditions. This is just exacerbated.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is going to be more and more. It's going to come more and more to the forefront, I think, and hopefully be talked about more. You know,
yes.
Hopefully not as a scourge or, you know, it's because I suppose when people say about mental health, well, mental welfare is much better than sort of say mental problems. You know, and we all have mental welfare, however it is. You know, we all have
mm-hmm.
good days, bad days, but you know, it's just about yeah. And on a small island like this, we've all got to look after each other, perhaps even more so than the mainland, because we see each other all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's what it's all about.
Amazing.
Well, you know, this island is run by volunteers.
I mean, I was going to say nothing on that island is, you know, is fully funded. Nothing on that island it has fully what it needs, and so it does rely on its community to build, you know, the island that you want. And I think that, you know, the best thing about you and Dad and all of the people on the island is that you kind of got enough time to, you know, to go and focus on these things. And you know, I mean, that's probably the best thing, isn't it? Is that, you know, what are
totally.
you busy with right now, Mum? What's on your plate?
Mind, Meals on Wheels. Well, there's also there's also things. A lot of us are doing like shopping for people who can't go out and shop at the moment. So, but going back to my technical problems, I was doing so well the other day until I mistakenly deleted the shopping list I was working on for somebody. So, you know, so it's fine. It's fine. I remembered it because I'd looked at it before. But so, yeah, I mean, it's anything really that needs doing. Anything.
So finally, what are you most looking forward to once all this lockdown is over?
Seeing you and Emily in London.
Oh.
Or getting you guys over here.
Oh, that's sweet.
Seriously, that is, so there's nothing like a cwtch. And yeah, and I am missing that. I don't think I mean, we're just having a lovely time, really, which is a terrible thing to say. Well, some people won't like to hear that, but you know, because we're so far advanced now, we can see our friends. You know, we can go out to lunch, obviously observing all the social, you know, the guidelines, and nobody's taking that. We're not being blatant about it. We are sort of absolutely sort of sticking to that rigidly. Yeah. Because otherwise, oh goodness knows what would happen if it did come on the island. It doesn't bear thinking about. So there's almost like an added responsibility to keep it off island, really. Absolutely. You know, so.
Oh God. Well, look, Mum, it's been wonderful speaking to you today. The thing is, I know that we could talk for hours and hours and hours, but I think we've covered some really interesting things there.
Good. Do you feel as though you found out a few things you didn't know about me before? Probably not.
Probably not, but I think what I really enjoy doing, and the reason why CamTalks exists as a podcast, is so I can speak to my friends and my family about the things I already know about. I have tried interviewing people, strangers, but I never know I don't know what to talk about with strangers. So at least I know you know, some of your highlights, and there's many more. But it was really fascinating just to talk a little bit about, you know, what it was like when you were 28, obviously Geroge Furey, and then the care home, and these are stories that I'm really going to value in the future, and my children's children will be able to watch this.
Right. Which watch their gran.
Absolutely, Mum. Well, listen, thank you ever so much for being on the show.
Very, very welcome, my darling. Oh, can I call you my darling? Yes.
Yeah, of course you can. Right, well, listen, Mum, I love you lots, and
okay, love you too.
And I'll speak to you later.
Okay, my darling. Okay, lots of love.
Love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye now. Bye.